Hello. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Adam Miller, chairman of 1p.org and co-founder of 97%. And thank you for joining our inaugural gun safety symposium. We're going to be joined by the top two visionaries in the industry today, Timmy O, who is the founder of Barra Safety, and Kai Klepfer, who is the founder and CEO of BioFire.
Thanks for having us, Adam.
No problem. So I've been in the tech industry for 2 decades, and I've seen technology transform virtually every aspect of our lives, from automotive to retail, to manufacturing, to transportation. Every aspect of our lives has been changed by technology, except in the area of gun safety. And Kai, I've heard you talk about the history of firearms and the lack of innovation. Why do you think there's been so little innovation in this area? And maybe tell us, what are you doing at BioFire to change that?
For sure. So obviously the gun industry is one of America's sort of oldest established manufacturing industries. It's not necessarily the oldest, but it's definitely up there, and it's been a part of American as well as European manufacturing for quite a while. What that means is it has also been, as you said, one of probably the last industries to see really the impact of technology or development beyond just sort of incremental improvements in manufacturing processes. And so this is due to a whole bunch of different factors, right? I think the first one is the kind of improvements you actually would need to see to build something that is a sea change or significant step change difference from like the traditional mechanical firearm. The technology required to enable that, which would have had to be developed outside of the firearms industry, right, by the semiconductor industries, by the smartphone industries. That technology has generally not existed for quite a while, and so only, I would say, very recently has it started to become feasible to evaluate what a firearm that is not just a pure mechanical system would look like, right? Because if you're constraining yourself to a pure mechanical firearm, take for example a handgun, and your purpose is to build a device that's going to propel a piece of metal, very rapidly in the direction that you point it with a pretty high degree of reliability. I would argue that a modern handgun is reasonably optimized from an engineering perspective, right? It's only when you actually start to consider other areas of innovation, for example, safety, where there is a demand for and an opportunity to leverage more advanced technology, that's more similar to what we see in our kind of modern electronic devices. And so to the second part of your question, that's exactly what BioFire is trying to do, right? We are an early stage startup based in Broomfield, Colorado, working on building what we consider to be the future of firearm safety. And so we're developing basically a handgun that has a whole bunch of embedded technology built into it that provides a couple key features, the most important of which it has biometric sensors that ensure that only the owner or somebody that the owner has chosen will be able to actually use that firearm. And so rather than the sort of existing status quo of having firearms that are usable by anybody over about the age of 3 who has physical access to those firearms, our product is always locked by default, right? There's no human action, there's no steps required to actually lock the firearm. It just is locked by default and only ever unlocked when it's actively held by the owner or somebody that the owner has chosen to provide access to. And this is, I think, a really important point because everybody makes mistakes, right? I've talked to experienced veterans, career law enforcement officers who have made a mistake one day, and everybody is subject to human error and have left firearms unsecured where kids have been able to find them, right? And that's exactly the situation we want to prevent, and especially among sort of more entry level, less experienced gun owners who maybe don't have that 30 years of law enforcement training, right? The incidence or the likelihood of a mistake is even higher. And so we can't replace proper gun safety, right? It's still very important that folks use firearms responsibly if they're going to choose to own a firearm and bring it into their home. But we can help provide an additional tool that takes away a really big source of potential deaths. Obviously, over 2/3 of gun deaths in the United States are a result of suicides and accidents. Not all of those are from unsecured firearms, but a large portion of them are, especially among teenagers and children. And that's, I've never talked to a gun owner that wanted their kid to find their gun, and we want to help make that possible.
Timmy, just on that exact point, many gun owners are focused on protecting their families. That's why they have the gun. And as a result, they often will keep the gun near their bed at night, loaded, in case an intruder were to enter the house, they have a way to protect themselves. On the flip side, as Kai just mentioned, these loaded guns can also be used in unauthorized way, including young adult suicides. What have you built at Vara, and how does it help solve that problem?
Yep. To give some quick background, there's over 300 million firearms in the US right now, and studies have showed that approximately 50% of these firearms are left unsecured, which is pretty astonishing. This is actually one of the top contributing reasons why firearms are the second leading cause of death among children and teens in the US. So through technology, we wanted to create something that people would actually use. When I started Vara, I conducted research at the LAPD and to determine why this occurs, and I found out the main point is all about access. So right now, the current existing safes on the market make it difficult to get to a gun in an emergency. So when a gun owner has a gun in the home to protect their family, it's all about getting to it in time. And right now, it takes multiple steps. You have to get to the safe, open it. Your hands are likely shaking. It's likely dark. Getting a proper grip is difficult. So all these factors play into the reason why traditional gun safes aren't used. So we created a product that really was designed to break down this barrier between access and security and create a product that would really be able to be used for protection. I have a quick video to showcase that right here.
Go ahead.
As a gun owner, this is how I keep my kids safe for my kids, nice and secure. This is rich.
Yep. So the beauty about this product is that it's designed to look like a holster. And as soon as you grab the gun, your thumb will land on the fingerprint sensor, which will then unlock. So now this speed of access is even on par with people that are leaving it on their table or inside their bedside desk. So there's no excuse anymore not to use a security device and have the protection.
So Timmy, just with the product, it looks like a holster. I can bolt it to the nightstand, but what if I just took the whole nightstand with me? Can I get it?
Yep. So the beauty is the whole device itself is made out of all metal. So it withstands over 350 pounds of force. So as long as you secured it to something substantial, such as your bed, a sturdy desk, or you could even mount it inside your closet, this will prevent someone from ripping the gun out and taking it away with you.
And Kai, just on the product, obviously people who are using guns for protection want to make sure it works and want it to work quickly. So I've heard some resistance to the whole idea of smart guns based on the idea that, well, you can't depend on the fact that you'll be able to access it or the trigger's going to work. What if you're sweating because you're nervous? Are those real factors today?
Absolutely, right. And I will say, in talking to customers, this is a space that personally I've been in for about 8 or 9 years now, and have quite a few conversations with folks who own miniguns, never own guns, all across the spectrum. And among folks that are considering purchasing a firearm, especially a smart gun, oftentimes the number one concern is reliability, right? Like if you're going to choose to bring a firearm into your home for self-defense or carry a firearm as a concealed carry weapon, right? You obviously are expecting that firearm to be available to be used if, in the event that you actually do need to access that firearm. And so certainly, again, number one concern is reliability. I will say BioFire, unfortunately, we don't have a pretty video to show, and that's particularly because we're still working on developing the product, right? And we've spent a couple years now really digging into the detailed engineering implementation of how to make something like this possible, because you are taking a system that, as I said before, is a pretty simple kind of mechanical device that's been, well established and iterated on over 100 years, and you're adding additional complexity, right? We are incorporating technology, processors, batteries, biometric sensors. And when we do that, we need to ensure that we're doing that in a best-in-class way. And so what BioFire has done is we're not building a consumer device, right? We treat this as a piece of, like for example, a medical device or a piece of aerospace flight hardware or an automotive electronic braking controller, right? And the team that we've built here in Colorado is basically the same, right? Like we've brought in experts from industries that understand how to build safety-critical, ultra-high reliability pieces of engineering. And what I will say is by opening up, I can't share a lot of details, but by opening up the ability to actually use technology and things beyond mechanical components, we've actually been able to improve the reliability of certain portions of the firearm and expect our final product to be as reliable, if not likely more reliable than a comparable mechanical firearm. And that's through a combination of features, a combination of engineering, rigorous testing. We expect to spend over a year testing the product before it will get launched. And yes, so overall, it's absolutely a concern, but it's something that we've structured pretty much the entire organization to address. And I think it is, absolutely a solvable problem. Similarly with the latency, basically the timing, similar to what Tammy's talking about, it's obviously very important if you are going to try to use a firearm, you actually are able to access that quickly. And what I'll say is, we are well under a second from when you pick that up to when the firearm is ready for use. And so it's pretty much unnoticeable in most of our tests.
Yep.
Yeah. So the criticisms really are outdated at this point. Just the technology is advanced to such a point that these are highly reliable and very fast biometrics.
Yep.
In a way that just didn't exist before.
Yep. And I actually have a fun anecdote to share since we've gotten around 4,000 units into the hands of actual gun owners now. So we have some pretty incredible reviews. Initially with the Reach 1, we were using like an off-the-shelf module. So it's basically the same biometrics as other gun safes in the market. And so there was a little bit of that lag. They loved the design of the holster, but the biometrics was the main point that everyone was focusing on. So when we developed our own proprietary system and just completely ramped up technology on every level on that regards, the feedback we started getting was enormous. Where, for example, we have one of our partners over at Walk the Talk America. He owned like a huge gun company. He got one of our products and he was a big skeptic of the biometrics initially, because no matter how great it is, there's that slight delay. When he used ours, he couldn't feel any of that at all. And we have customers that are coming back saying, this is incredible. I didn't know biometrics could be that fast. We had a whole cohort of police officers testing it, and they're like, this works even more fast and reliably than Apple iTouch sensors. So it just goes to show that we've moved technology to a point now where you can have both that speed and reliability that wasn't there in the past.
So the world's got used to seeing young entrepreneurs who are successful, like you guys. But I've always found that the most successful entrepreneurs in technology are the ones that are passionate about what they do. And one thing I've always found very interesting about both of you is how early in your lives you got interested in this field and started working on your products. So, Timmy, maybe starting with you, when did you first become committed to gun safety and why? And when did you first start working on the concept behind VAR?
Yep. So I started the idea early in high school, and when I went into college for engineering, there was a competition called Change the World. I submitted the idea, it ended up winning, and it was initially a very crude gun safety idea. They encouraged me to share it online, and I put it on ar15.com, which is one of the biggest online gun forums, and it got completely torn apart. I went viral with 100,000 people just commenting on how stupid of an idea it was and why they wouldn't use it. So that summer, I went to the LAPD because my uncle is an officer there. And I did some heavy research and started to find out exactly what the pain points were and what I could do to solve this problem. But I think the biggest driver was because I grew up with an uncle who taught me about gun safety. You hear stories all the time where little children get access to loaded guns and actually hurt or injure themselves. And I thought in this day and age, something like that should not be happening, especially since I have two younger sisters.
Kai, you also started thinking about this in high school. How come?
Yeah, slightly different background for me, but yes, started my sophomore year of high school, actually right after the Aurora Theater shooting. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, which unfortunately a lot more folks know about now than they did a couple weeks ago. But grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and at the time, the Aurora Theater shooting was one of the worst mass shootings the country had ever seen. And so, a high school student, right, I was not expecting to be building a business or a company or even a real product, but wanted to even just start evaluating, this sort of concept of a smart gun, right? Which is, to be clear, is not a new idea, right? James Bond has a smart gun, right? It's been in science fiction media and sort of fantasy for quite a while, but it's not something that's ever been commercialized for a whole variety of reasons, right? Nobody's ever sold a commercial smart gun of any kind. There has been some exciting work in the last couple of years in Timmy's area, right? Especially with his product, as well as a couple others around better gun safety locking technologies that make it more accessible and more usable, and really, really excited to see that. But we still, even today, have not seen any really development outside of BioFire, and certainly nobody's ever sold a product. And so anyway, back to the background, started looking at it as a science fair project, actually ended up winning first place internationally at the Intel Science Fair in engineering, which was quite a bit of a surprise. And so I ended up continuing to work on the project, backed by a couple folks out of Silicon Valley, including Ron Conway and a few others, as well as a group called the Smart Tech Challenges Foundation that was doing grants for that. And so that initial kind of early recognition, especially around, as I started to talk about that, we ended up with feature coverage in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, CBS Evening News. We had a viral video that ended up with, I want to say, like 30 million views. And so that initial early recognition of like, wow, like this is obviously something that is people are very interested in, right? Definitely the engineering challenges, the business challenges of building a viable company in this space are quite significant. But the baseline interest, I think, at least for me, made it very clear very early that this kind of concept of smart guns and starting to incorporate technology directly into a firearm has a place and a role to play in the broader kind of conversation around gun violence. Although, I will say, looking back at the kind of Aurora Theater shooting, we don't anticipate that smart guns are going to prevent all mass shootings, but there definitely are some. But again, that area where we think this can have really significant impact is children, teenagers, other sort of members of the household getting access to firearms that they're, not trained or not supposed to be having access to. And the ability to really control that fully, I think, is invaluable.
Once you see these products or even hear about these concepts, it seems obvious to people. Why do you think it was initially so challenging for you to raise money for your companies? Timmy, maybe you first, and then Kai.
Yep. So the topic of firearms is extremely polarizing. So I've had people even just turn me down because of the mention of the word guns. They didn't really care if it was safety or not. They just didn't want to be involved at all. And technology and gun safety was something that was very new. There was no market proof to actually show investors to give them confidence that this decision would yield a profitable return. A lot has changed since then, but that's what was difficult in the beginning.
Kai, what about you?
Yeah, and I completely agree with everything Timmy just said. And to further build on that, I think there's a couple different factors that make this complicated as an organization. And this, I think, equally applies to Timmy's work and my work. To start off with, the most sort of standard way, I think, to build an early stage company is via venture capital or angel investment funding, right? You need to build a business plan and then you pitch that to a variety of investors. The most sort of public, well-known way to do that, the kind of, I would say, low-hanging fruit or first glance approach, that is generally venture and angel. And the thing about that is, even ignoring the fact that it's working on firearms, anything like that, both Timmy and I are working on hardware businesses, right? Our fundamental revenue streams are from selling, widgets, right? Devices that are going out into the world. And hardware businesses, due to the long lead times, long cycle times, initial high risk, and manufacturing, are just generally considered to be a significantly higher risk category from an investment perspective than a software enterprise SaaS business, for example. And what that means is you've already self-selected out, I would say, probably 80% of traditional venture capital and angel investments. There's always exceptions, right? For a good enough deal, especially a late stage deal, like mini funds will make exceptions to those policies. But as early stage, seed stage or even pre-seed stage investments, hardware is particularly hard to fundraise for. And so I think beyond that, both Timmy and I are working on hardware, as he said, that is in an unproven and novel market, right? And that, I would say, that speaks to a great opportunity for disruption, right? And overall can have very, very high returns in the long term. But it means that there's basically no proof short term beyond, broad studies. For example, some of the folks we saw speaking previously from Johns Hopkins has done some really, really good kind of broad primary market research on what would smart guns look like? What would gun safety technology look like? And, those numbers are very promising, right? For example, one study showed that over 56% of existing gun owners and around 65% of the US adult population would consider a product like a smart gun if it was available and reliable. That's still not direct market data, right? And so you end up with these compounding risk factors, hardware, a completely novel space. And then finally, what Timmy was talking to, especially among venture, right? It's very, very common for the limited partner agreements that, actually form venture funds to have things that are called vice clauses, right? Which basically restrict investments in things that might carry reputational liability, pornography, like marijuana, firearms or weapons of any kind. And so even if you get past the sort of hardware and, unproven and somewhat unprovable market conversations, you still end up with this kind of vice clause kind of category that tends to knock out most at the end. And so I'll say for us, initial fundraising was definitely challenging, right? We were able to pull together a fantastic group of angels, predominantly just to early luck, honestly, and meeting the right people in Silicon Valley to start building some of those connections. But taking that step from like, angel investment kind of pre-seed money to let's go actually raise an institutional fundraising round is quite complicated. And, I will say we found our niche much more in the kind of family office, high net worth individual, folks that are really passionate about solving this problem and kind of looking there as opposed to traditional venture. Did that answer your question, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. Timmy, in the last session, Matt mentioned the large percentage of gun acts, of gun violence that are committed with stolen guns.
Yeah.
How does Vera help protect that? And are there any good examples you can give?
Yeah, certainly. So the biggest thing is one of the biggest areas where firearms are stolen are in vehicles. There are some areas that are restricted from people carrying it into a place, such as like stadiums or federal buildings and even schools. So the beauty about our product is that it allows you to mount it even within your vehicle, such as in the center console, so that you could still have access to it when you need it, but it's secure. So that's where the versatility comes in, where we're building a whole suite of products that can apply to from handguns to rifles and other purposes, so that people can more rely on better safety measures and prevent guns from being stolen as well.
Yeah, I think in particular, there was one state that had concealed carry laws, but the stadium, the football stadium, did not allow guns in the stadium. And so people would literally leave their guns in the parking lot with their car. And there was extreme theft that happened in those parking lots of guns.
Yeah.
So this would theoretically prevent that from happening and solve that problem.
Exactly.
Kai, I remember talking to you about electric cars and how, in much the same way that electric cars have been talked about for 20, 30 years, and even there being early examples of electric cars decades ago, you didn't really have a movement until Tesla came about. But how does that equate to what you're doing with BioFire?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to use Tesla as a direct analogy, right? Because there's a whole bunch of structural things that are very different. Not to mention, the names of the founders. But what I will say is, from a high level perspective, I think it is very interesting, because if you just look at the EV space in general, it's not like car manufacturers had not thought of EVs, right? The concept was not a new one. Again, it had been science fiction for a while. Obviously, it was a little further along. There actually were even a couple production cars, Priuses and things like that. There were hybrids or even, potentially full EVs at some point. And they had, not been particularly exciting, right? And most of the industry had pretty much completely written off EVs as a major category, right? It was always going to be this niche, smart cars, like inner city European kind of market, but it was never going to be mass market, right? And what Tesla did, in my opinion, that's fundamentally different than all of the previous approaches is Tesla built a car that people really want to drive that happens to be an electric vehicle, right? Tesla is not about just building electric vehicles. They're leveraging the unique capabilities of electric vehicles to build a car that is objectively better. And I will note that I'm biased. I drive a Model 3, right? It's the best car I've ever driven. I'm never going to buy something that's not a Tesla, probably ever again in my life, until they have a real competitor. But what they have done is built an actual experience that meets what I would call the user requirements, or the customer requirements of driving a car much better in a lot of ways than it's possible to even meet with a internal combustion engine vehicle. What we're trying to do with our product is exactly the same, right? We're not taking an off-the-shelf gun and bolting a fingerprint sensor onto it, right? That, sure, technically that might be a smart gun, and my very, very early prototypes, that's exactly what I did. But for an actual product here, what we need to do is actually build a firearm that meets the needs of our customers, which are predominantly sort of home defense consumers, meets the needs of our customers better than any other product out there, right? Because this is not something that we're looking to legislate or mandate, right? This is something that we're looking to offer as a choice for customers that want to, have that added level of safety, which, again, our research as well as independent research shows is quite a significant majority of gun owners, right? So that holistic experience and building a product that is fundamentally a very good firearm and a very good overall experience, where every little detail has been considered. The holistic experience is much more like using an iPhone or driving a Tesla than it is something else, I think is going to be really important, right? And the reason for this is, if you look at what happened with VW, right there, and the most recent electric vehicle that they've spent over $1 billion on, that's a very, very good drivetrain, right? Like, it actually is, in most cases, you could consider that vehicle to be better than a Tesla, but everything on top of it, the features, the software, are horrible in comparison, and they got really, really bad initial reviews. that's why I think the importance of this holistic experience, actually testing and evaluating the entire product rather than just one feature, I think is really important.
So Timmy, Kai mentioned that there's more you can do with this technology than simply use biometrics as a key. What's an example in your case how the Reach product could be used beyond just using biometrics to unlock the gun?
So we'll be developing a smart connected app that can help with stuff like suicide prevention and other features like smart home connectivity to call 911, and then just a whole other suite of features that have been in high demand by the gun industry.
So what's an example? If a vet comes home with PTSD and they're seeing a therapist, what might you be able to do with the lock in that case?
So there is some stuff that happened in discussion. We won a grant from the VA on veteran awards regarding veteran suicide, and one of the features that were discussed was a two-factor authentication. For example, like a spouse or a counselor would have to authenticate in order for the person to retrieve the gun.
Amazing. So these products sound incredible. Are they going to be more expensive than other products in the market?
No. So originally we started at a $299 price point, but this market is one that is very price sensitive. So we are continuing to drive down our cost of goods to make our product more affordable. And later this year, we're going to be creating another version that specifically has been designed for that lower price point that has been requested around like the $100, $150 mark, just to make so that we can have a gun safe in every home in the country.
Okay, fantastic.
And similarly,
go ahead.
Yeah, I can't share final pricing. We're still quite a ways out from that, but the mission of the company is how do we actually have an impact on gun violence, and that means that we have to be there in that moment where the kid actually picks up a gun, which means this needs to be accessible to the average gun purchaser. And so making that cost comparable to other firearms, with the understanding that it is a significantly more expensive product to manufacture, still making that as accessible as we possibly can, both through direct pricing as well as other incentives, is definitely something that we are very focused on.
Well, these products sound amazing in reducing gun violence, the same way that Uber has helped reduce drunk driving and Tesla has reduced oil consumption. It sounds like these products can significantly reduce gun violence. When are they going to be available in the market? Kai and then Timmy?
Yeah, we're probably about a year to 2 years out, right? It's very important, I think, to build a highly reliable, very high quality initial product here, right? A less reliable or kind of mediocre product, I think, is just not going to meet the needs of our customers. And so we're taking our time to focus on actually getting it right the first time. And yeah, it's not going to solve the whole problem of gun violence, but I think it can be a really important component to what is otherwise a very, very hard portion of gun violence to address around suicides and child accidents.
Great.
Yep.
And Timmy?
And for us, we're already selling online at varasafety.com, VARA-safety.com. So we're shipping those out. We're actually on our second generation already, and we'll be launching 2 additional products this year.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're all looking forward to your products in the market in widespread use. So thank you for doing that. Good luck.
Thanks for having us, Adam.